Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the May Lee Show. I'm your host, May Lee. I'm glad you could be with me either by podcast audio format or on video through the YouTube channel. So I wonder how everyone is doing. We are obviously still in the middle of this global pandemic, and here in the US, numbers are still going up, infections are still going up. Unfortunately, fatalities are going up. And, many places, many states, including California, where I am, we have been under shelter in place orders for a couple weeks now. We're going on we've been in shelter in place for 2 weeks now. Yeah, 2 weeks. Feels like 20 years. So it's a challenge for us all, right? We're not used to not being able to go wherever we want to and socialize and get together with people. I just had a birthday just this past Saturday on March 28th. And, birthdays are no big deal, anymore, really. But it is a weird thing when you actually can't even properly celebrate with friends and family. I mean, I would have gotten together with family and friends, but what ended up happening is that my mom, who's 84, and she has asthma and she's a cancer survivor. So she is absolutely the highest risk kind of person to get COVID-19. So she absolutely needs to be on lockdown. She can't go anywhere. Well, being the stubborn Korean woman that she is, she wanted to get a banking transaction done that she needed to be physically present in the bank. This transaction was a kind of a complex one, so they needed for her to actually be there physically to sign some documents. I literally tried to do anything I could to try to avoid that. I called, the bank, I called different branches, I called the Federal Reserve, and just was not able to figure out a way where she could do it remotely. So because she was so insistent, I basically mapped out this almost like a military strategy to prepare for this so that she could spend as little time physically in the bank as possible. So I went with her. We were all masked up, gloved up. I made her wait in the car and got everything prepared at the bank, all the documents ready, the manager ready, and then called her in and was able to take care of it pretty quickly and get her out. So, I was stressed out. I was so stressed out about the whole thing. So we get outside, we drove in separate cars, and then I was going to go to the grocery store to pick up some supplies for her, and I immediately wanted her to just go home. So as we're saying goodbye at that moment, and of course there was no hugging or kissing, no birthday hug or anything like that, she calls me over to come closer to her car. She reaches inside her car, and she pulls out a giant ass can of Lysol. And she says to me in Korean, "Come here, I'm going to spray you down." And she was dead serious. She wanted to spray me down because we had just been in the bank together. And I just was, no, mom, no, that's not nothing. Come here, I'm going to spray you. And I'm like refusing. I swear to you, she was about ready to chase me around the parking lot of that bank to spray me down. But I finally convinced her that it wasn't necessary, that she just needed to go home and take care of herself, and I would do some shopping and I would come and drop off the groceries at her house, which I did without getting sprayed with Lysol. But, it was one of those moments when I got to her house, I put the 2 bags of groceries in front of her door and then rang her doorbell. And I took a picture of this moment just to document it because she just peeked out her little head because she didn't want to come out. And, I said, "Here's the groceries, Mom." And I took a picture of her and she just gave me this cute little mom smile and wished me a happy birthday. And, that is the new reality for now. I could look at it as kind of sad because it was my birthday and I couldn't even hug my mom. But at the same time, how I looked at it? I said, at least I saw her, in person. And so I was grateful for that. And I think that's what I've been trying to do during these times that seem dark and confusing. Practicing a lot more gratitude for things, little things, of just, having opportunity to slow down, having opportunities to have long conversations with friends and family that you normally may never do just because we're so busy, everything's so busy and so fast. So definitely trying to appreciate things like that. And, people are trying to find some humor to make each other laugh throughout this. So there's some memes floating around in posts. And, of course, we're all sharing them online. And there's two that came out today that I just thought were hilarious. I have to share with you guys. One is, it's a cartoon of 3 aliens, right? Green aliens. And one of them is standing up saying, "Hey, ladies, what you up to?" And then 2 other aliens are on the couch. One has a glass of wine. And the one says, "Watching season 2020 of Earth, shit is getting wild." That's exactly what the aliens must be thinking as they're peering on us here on Earth. And then another one from the Ellen Show. It says, "For those who have lost track, today is Blur's Day, the 40th of Malprile." Because I'm sure you guys have fallen victim to this too, like not knowing what day it is, what date it is, what time it is. So yeah, we're all in the same boat, needless to say. We're all feeling the same thing. So the more we can connect about these things, both the bad and the good, I think is healthy. Okay, because we don't want to just completely isolate ourselves and feel like we're completely alone and not experiencing the same things, because we really are. We're experiencing the same things. But on the flip side of things, those are the funny things, the lighter things I wanted to share, which I think is important. We are still obviously in this crisis. And I think what's really difficult and heart-wrenching to hear about and watch on the news are the healthcare workers who are still struggling with lack of supplies, and they're on the front lines dealing with this. They're seeing the worst parts of this crisis right now in the hospitals, and so many of them are working with very little protection. We've been hearing this for weeks now. Not enough masks, not enough PPE, the protective equipment, not enough ventilators, not enough room in the hospitals, not enough beds. And this, I know, it's like, what the fuck, right? I mean, I think a lot of us are feeling that way. Why is this happening? Thankfully, the private sector is starting to step up. Even just individuals are starting to make masks for people. It's a community effort, but it still is. I think a lot of us are questioning, why the hell isn't the government taking care of this? This is the United States of America. We're supposed to be the most powerful, wealthiest country on the planet, and yet we can't even get simple supplies to hospital workers who are trying to save people's lives in this war. We are in a war against this coronavirus. I just saw a report today on by Bloomberg, and it's an article that says that now healthcare workers are being threatened. That they'll be fired if they speak out about the lack of gear. We've been hearing from different healthcare workers, right, shooting their own videos, going on social media, doing news interviews saying that, they don't have gear. Their hospitals are in really bad shape. Well, apparently now hospitals around the country are threatening their staff, saying, if you talk about this, if you report this, if you speak out about this, you will be fired. And there are examples already. This emergency room physician in Washington State, Ming Lin, he was fired on Friday because he gave an interview to a newspaper about inadequate protective equipment and testing at his hospital. A nurse was fired in Chicago for talking about this. So this is happening. That, I'm sorry, is so messed up. They're doing this because it's a plea for help. They're saying, we need this help. How else is the rest of the world going to know about this if people on the front lines don't report it and tell us what's going on? So that to me is insane. That's just wrong. Okay. So if we have to now, push this, we should all speak up about this. We should all get reports from our friends who are in, the hospitals, who are the doctors and nurses and tech workers. If you hear about your friends telling you these stories, then get it out there. Talk about it on social media. Call the newspapers, call the networks, tell them, because it's got to get out there. Okay. These doctors and healthcare workers should not be fired for telling the truth. That's bullshit. Sorry, that's total bullshit. I can't believe it. Okay, so that's my rant for that. And of course, the racism against Asians, something that I've been talking about on this show for weeks now. That's unfortunately still going on, the xenophobia. Last week on the show, I called out the fact that a lot of high-profile Asians in the Asian American community are remaining silent. Not using their platforms or their voices to call this behavior out as wrong and push back against it. I've been disappointed by that, and I'm watching carefully. Believe me, NextShark, we're all watching very carefully to see who's saying something and who isn't. The good news is that we have seen an improvement over the week. Especially from high-profile people in institutions, not necessarily Asians, some Asians, but the good thing is that we're hearing from other powerful voices. For instance, Senator Kamala Harris from California, former Democratic nominee, she said in a tweet, "For weeks, the Trump administration has pushed racist and xenophobic rhetoric against Asian Americans. As San Francisco's DA, I created a hate crimes unit because I know the damage words can cause. We must be clear, any attacks against Asian Americans are attacks on us all." Mayor Eric Garcetti of Los Angeles also tweeted that a virus doesn't discriminate. We will never tolerate racism or attacks against our Asian and Asian American communities. Senator Chuck Schumer, viruses do not discriminate. Blaming Chinese and Asian Americans is ignorant and dangerous. So we are starting to hear more and more high-profile politicians and leaders saying, something very publicly about this xenophobic behavior and really condemning it, which is what we need to hear. Another one, a PSA, a public service announcement, was made by the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. Very powerful PSA, talking about the virus has no ethnicity. We are in this together. If you're a victim of a hate crime, please contact your local law enforcement. So they're encouraging the people to report this. The DA in New York, I think a week or two ago, had created a hate crimes hotline for this. So we're starting to see a lot more movement. We're starting to see a lot more support throughout the broader community, which is great because we need allies in this. We can tell each other as Asians that this exists, but that's preaching to the choir, right? But my point about high-profile Asians saying something about this is that you guys have a much broader reach, not just within the Asian community, but also beyond, because you're well known, because people respect you, because people pay attention to what you say, Asian or not. And that is a powerful platform to use. If not now, when? This is the biggest crisis that we've been up against for decades. So if not now, when would you use your power and your voice? And that's what I'm asking. It just takes a little courage. Okay. But you know what? Life, at the end of your life, you never want to say, gosh, I wish I had spoken up about something that mattered, rather than just staying silent. Okay. So think about that for a second. That's why I do what I do, because I'm not going to be at the end of my life and say, oh boy, I'm so glad I remained silent about these things that really mattered and had an effect on my community. I'm not trying to give you a guilt trip here. I'm just, well, maybe a little bit, but it's all for a good cause. I hope you guys know that. But because there is more activity going on around this issue, we're starting to see more campaigns sprout up in support of the Asian community and also fighting back the racism. And so a lot of different campaigns have started. One of them that started a couple weeks ago is hashtag Wash the Hate. And it was started by Asians in entertainment and television to talk about the fact that we needed to wash the hate from ourselves. And, obviously ask people to think about what this all meant. And so it was a campaign where people shot themselves washing their hands, because that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to wash our hands all the time, but also then talk about the racism and how we need to fight back on that and how that is just so wrong. So that was a campaign that was started a few weeks ago and has taken off. So I decided to contact somebody who is part of that campaign. Celia Au is an actress and a filmmaker, and she has done one of the videos, but she kind of helped inspire the campaign in an indirect way. So she's joining me now, and we're going to talk about how this all got going and some of the other issues at hand. Celia, welcome to the May Lee Show. I'm glad to see you.
Hey, thank you for having me on the May Lee Show. This is cool.
Yeah, and you're in New York, so I'm glad you could join us from there. And New York, as we all know, is the epicenter of the COVID right now in the United States. And you were just telling me before we started this interview that you just had a doctor friend tell you some
nurse friend
to tell you some really horrible news.
Yeah, it's. Guys, honestly, our medical professionals are our angels and savior right now.
Totally.
Like, my friend was just telling me that she's like, a patient died on me already from COVID.
Yeah.
But this is the first one she saw dying in front of her.
Oh, gosh. And so how is she holding up?
She's holding up like she's isolated herself, so because she's afraid of infecting her family members.
Right.
So she's keeping herself isolated in a room and then going to work and just going back to her room. And that's a lot of, I feel like that's one of the biggest fear within the medical community right now is affecting their parents, their family members, their kids,
Right.
And on top of all of this, they're afraid, especially the Asian American ones and Asian ones are afraid to go to work because they're like, we're going to get attacked on our way to work.
Yeah. Well, there was a video that went viral of a nurse, I believe, in the UK, and she's Asian, and she was verbally assaulted by a white couple on her way to a shift at the hospital. And so this is the extra layer of anxiety that Asians are living with around the world because of this virus. I mean, that's obviously why we're talking today is to talk about, we all know that this xenophobia is going on and has been going on, and it continues to get worse. We continue to hear these stories of overt racism going on all over the world, including here in the U.S. But you are part of this campaign that started a few weeks ago called hashtag Wash the Hate, right?
Yes.
Tell me, now, you didn't start it, but it's because of something you posted, right, that got somebody else thinking about starting this campaign. So can you tell me the story about this?
Yeah, this is a couple of weeks ago. There was this video that was that my friend sent me one morning, and he was like, look at this just happened. It was literally this Asian guy minding his own business on the subway. He's just standing there, and the guy's like, don't get near me. And he's Febrezing him around.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, that's not cool. And you can hear on the sideline, there's a grandma, like an Asian grandma on the train speaking in Chinese, goes, honey, come over here. Don't argue with him, little bro. Like, honey, come to grandma, come to grandma.
Ugh.
Not related to him at all. And it's just a fear the grandma's trying to, like, and then the guy, there's a second part of the video, the guy was trying to like speak up back to the guy that's spraying Febreze on him. He was like, what, why can't I be here? Why can't you move then? And then the grandma just came and grabbed him. I was like, come on, just go.
Wow.
And this is before COVID was even a thing, like a huge thing here in the States. So I saw that and I was like, oh, can I post it on Twitter? And my friend was like, I didn't shoot that video. I pulled it off from Facebook, but yeah, of course. And then it got at right now, I think 1.6 million hits, like views. And there's, of course, it started a conversation. Multiple news outlet was like, hey, can we talk about this? And I was like, I didn't shoot the video. I can talk to this lady on Facebook. So there's been a lot of discussion about like xenophobia because of COVID-19. And then I got a call from my friend one day and he goes, hey, so my company and I are thinking about starting this campaign called Wash the Hate to expose, xenophobia and telling people that it's not okay while following the CDC guideline of washing your hands for 20 seconds.
Is your friend Asian?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
He owns an Asian PR company.
Okay.
I think he owns it, or he runs the Asian PR company.
But it's a PR company. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and I was like, sure, of course. So I was part of the campaign from the beginning. Taima, Osric Chow, Ludi Lin, AJ. So there's a bunch of us that started it, and then we were like, okay, where do we take it next? So we started telling people to then shoot their own Wash the Hate videos.
Right. Okay. So it was a way to at least somehow educate the public about the fact that you cannot connect the virus to just any random Asian person just because they're Asian. And that's the ridiculousness about what this xenophobia is, right? It's just trying to put the blame on something that is or isn't related, but just at least there has to be some sort of scapegoat, right?
And there shouldn't be. We should work together as humanity to target and to defeat this invisible enemy right now.
Right.
Like literally the day that we released the campaign is the day our president called it Chinese virus.
Yeah.
It happened simultaneously. We're like, are you kidding me?
That's amazing. I mean, that's amazing in just like a shocking way that it happened on the very same day you were releasing the campaign. Well, tell me how the campaign has gone in terms of the initial reaction and then the continuation. Is it working? I mean, what are you guys thinking?
Definitely. Like I can't say for all the other campaigns out there because I don't know when they begin. But since Wash the Hate, I've seen like racism is a virus. I've seen hate is a virus. And then there's another one that just started and we've been talking. It's called Be Cool to Asians.
Mm-hmm. Be Cool to Asians?
Yeah, it's LA based.
Okay.
And it's a producer, a film producer, TV producer who experienced racial attacks recently with her dog walking down the street. And then she was like, no, this is not cool. We got to do something about it.
Yeah. Here's the one area that I get a little concerned with when it comes to the Asian community. And this has been historically sort of repeated. You're young, but I'm a little bit older, so I've been watching this. And that is sometimes the Asian community is fragmented. And so there's too many efforts. Instead of all coming together to like bring all of our power together, it's like, here's this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And so you can't keep track. Who's legit, who isn't, who's making a difference, who isn't. And then the broader community, when I say that, I mean non-Asian community, they start saying, well, they don't have their act together. I mean, what's going on? We don't even know who to go to. Mm-hmm. Do you have a fear, because you're part of Wash the Hate, do you have a fear that if there's so many, that the message starts getting diluted and then you lose your audience?
You know what? It's hard to say, but what I've realized, at least from these couple of campaigns that I've been following, every time I put Wash the Hate right now, I will also hashtag racism as a virus.
Okay.
And vice versa. I see them hashtag Wash the Hate because we're all going for one idea, right?
Yeah.
And maybe I know that racism as a virus started by Broadway stars. Mm-hmm. So they're reaching out to their Broadway community, right? Wash the Hate, I feel like most of us are film and TV people, and we're reaching to film and TV people. And then there's, I think, I have to make sure. I think it's called Hate is a Virus. I don't remember the hashtag correctly, but it's more of like street hip hop people.
Okay.
So I know that there's different organization and different kind of campaigns going around, but they're united in their group. And if we can do these like massive groups and then they unite together for one message, which just seems like they all have the same message right now. and they gear towards this big kind of bubble that we need to spread out, right?
I hope so. I hope so. I
hope that's what I hope that will happen.
I think we all do. I think my fear, and that's why I wanted to do this show also, just to talk about the campaign you're involved with, but also, then mention others, is that we do have to keep our eye on the ball in terms of having that cohesive message and not diluting it so much so that people think that we're divided and fragmented. And that we just lose power that way, and right now is the time for us to really come together as one very strong voice for one very strong cause, right?
Definitely.
I'm hoping that that's the result.
I hope so too. Like, this is not the end of it, right? In the end of the day, my goal, or at least I hope the goal, is that as humanity in general, we get rid of discrimination and we get rid of xenophobia, which I know is not easy.
No.
I've been talking to people, and I'm like, hey, there's a reason why we took history classes in school, right?
Yeah.
Like, ever since you're in the first grade, you learn about American history, then women history, then world history, right? All the way up to college. Why are we letting history repeat itself?
Because it does. Unfortunately, Celia, it does. History does repeat itself. And here's one of the reasons why. It's because people don't learn about history. They don't learn about their own history. They don't learn about other people's histories, so that they're not educated enough in that. Look, even Asians. A lot of Asians don't know about the Chinese Exclusion Act. A lot of Asians don't know about Japanese internment. A lot of Asians don't know about Vincent Chin and how he was killed in Michigan. So these are things that we also have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, are we willing to, really dig into our own histories so that we don't repeat history? Let me ask you this, Celia, because you're of the younger generation. Is your generation, do you think, are you guys woke enough to realize that this is a really momentous time for Asians to rise up and come together? Because I feel like your generation has never really faced any sort of challenge with the racism against Asians like we are right now. Do you think you guys are aware of that?
I feel like we do feel it because, when maybe it was not like outward where it's such a public thing, like now, like our president is talking about it.
Yeah.
But we all have these kind of experience in school. When I was in elementary school, I remember a teacher telling me, like, you're in America, speak English. And I was like, okay, I can speak both. So what are you trying to say? I have friends that, after the teacher told them that, stop speaking Chinese once and for all, or stop speaking Korean or Japanese.
Right.
And they're like, I'm American and I only speak English. And I was like, no, my parents have always taught us to be proud, and it's better to be bilingual and or trilingual. Then we start learning Spanish, right?
Right.
So I think like 1-to-1, we all face that type of discrimination, but now it's just this big topic that has like gloomed over the whole Asian
and add to that fear, actually fear of being assaulted, right? So that's a different level that I think a lot of young Asian Americans have actually maybe never experienced or very rarely experienced that, right? So this is a first time that this has happened on this kind of level.
I also think that I can't speak for all again, but like my generation, at least my friends, we are learning we got to stand up for ourselves.
Good.
Right. Like I have friends' parents that used to tell us, like, just keep your head down and move along.
Yes.
And my parents were like, be the first one to fight back, because then they'll be scared. 90% of these people that are like racist or anyone that's like a bully, if you stand up to a bully, the bully gets scared.
Yeah. Yeah, bullies are usually cowards.
Yeah, they're the cowards, and they're the one that feels like, oh, because you won't challenge me, that's why I'm going to bully you.
Right.
So don't let them do that to you.
Right. Right.
And I think our generation it's grow up in like this in between time, sort of like we have our aunts, our uncles who are like first generation Americans. and their experience as like more, and then our grandparents like more Asian from Asia, and then now like this new complete American, Asian American type new generation fused together.
Yeah.
I see people younger than me, like my cousins are younger, and they don't, that concept just doesn't make sense in their head. And we're like, oh, we're
you
so
mean the concept of what?
Of like Asian American.
Okay. Yeah.
They're more Americanized, right? In a way that we still have some connection to our roots, and we'll try to always tell them about like, this is what happened back in the day, and they're like, oh, okay. I'm like, Chinatown wasn't like this before,
right?
Or like, I was like, do you know how Little Italy was like before? And like the evolution of New York. I feel like our generation have seen like a huge change in New York City, right? We know how wrong 9/11 was, and we should learn from that. And now that we're just...
And it's happening again. Exactly. 9/11, it happened, with the Muslims, and now with the COVID, it's happening to the Asians. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that, though. I mean, I was hoping that was going to be the case, where you said that the younger generation is willing to fight back and they're willing to speak up. And I think that is the change this time around with this crisis and this challenge that we're faced with, that there are more Asians now who are willing to say, no, this is not right. This is bullshit. I'm not going to accept it, and speak up about it.
I also think another thing that helped subconsciously is that when we are now accepted in the media, we'll say like
more so than before. I wouldn't say completely.
More so than before. Like we have the Crazy Rich Asians, we have the Fresh Off the Boat, we have like the Warrior, the Wu Assassins, like these shows that are Asian centric storylines, and people are like, oh, they're just like us.
Yeah. Well, what it is like when you have more representation on a consistent basis, then there's more acceptance. Then there's more saying, people saying, oh, this is just entertainment. They start not looking at it as race or ethnic.
Yes.
Right. And that's the beauty of more representation. If you put it in front of more people, they get used to it. They don't think it's so weird or so, oh my gosh, it's so rare. Right. So that is all part of it. It's all part of trying to create that society where all colors, everyone from all different backgrounds, should count. But unfortunately, because of
Can we just say, I have this whole thing when during last year when I was doing some press for my show, I was like, in the end of the day, we're humans, right? Like, can we just get rid of all these labels? Because labels are just going to pigeonhole us into these little sectors and areas.
Right.
And that's when discrimination happens. Because then one little area will be like, I'm better than you. And then people start fighting. And I get it. Everyone wants to feel good and that they're superior. But if we work together, that's when you bring humanity together and we can fight together and we can problem solve together.
Of course. And here's the thing about storytelling. You're in entertainment, I'm in media. The power of storytelling is to create connection. And when people feel connected, you realize that stories, everybody has shared experiences, no matter where you come from. We all have shared experience. We all want family and love and friendship and happiness and joy. These are all universal things that have nothing to do with our race or ethnicity or background, right? And that's the beauty of good storytelling.
I've said it before any of this happened, that like I was like, media is very effective in changing people's perspective. And now I was like, how is this? We cannot just sit here and do nothing and keep our heads down when we have people risking their lives. They're like the superheroes. They're cooler than superheroes because they're actually out there saving life. But then they also have to worry about their own lives and their own safety. That's ridiculous to me. And then
it is.
There was a little kid who, it's a friend of a friend's son, who ran home crying, saying he doesn't want to be Chinese because he's being made fun of, calling the friends, the classmates, schools. So I don't want to be friends with you because you're Chinese and you're the coronavirus.
Yeah,
that's not okay.
No, that's not okay.
And that comes from the parents.
It comes from the parents, but it also comes from, their surroundings and, other people saying, yeah, exactly. That's why we have to change that narrative. And so with what you're doing with, Wash the Hate and some other projects and what I'm doing with the show, this is what more of us have to be doing to come together. to get that message across.
And we need our allies to help.
We need our allies for sure.
And we have also, I've also pointed out, it's like, when this is over for us or when this kind of settles, we got to help the other causes as well.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
We can't
absolutely.
just be like, after it's done here, we're like, all right, that's great. Moving on.
Hopefully that will be the lasting effect, that it's a sense of community, and that community means everyone, not just your own, but also to have the empathy towards other communities to work together. So, hey, Celia, it was so great to talk to you. And I'm glad that you're part of this campaign, Wash the Hate, but I hope that you guys will all work together, for the same cause, and, so that we can really build a much stronger voice together about this.
Thank you, May, for having me. I mean, I hope I have some useful stuff that you guys can use and take with you. It's just, we got to all come together, and whatever people need help, we should stand up for each other.
We should. All right. Okay, listen, you take care of yourself. Stay strong, stay healthy. All right, stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Stay healthy and safe.
Okay, now I want to turn to looking at this issue of racism, xenophobia, discrimination from a more historic perspective, because I think we always should look at things in context and from a broader view of history, because that will give us a better understanding where things come from and why sometimes people behave the way they do, without complicating things too much. So let me step back for a second. Obviously I read Instagram a lot, just like a lot of you do, because, people are saying things, posting things that are pretty interesting. And, I get a lot of messages from people on the May Lee Show Instagram page relating to what's going on. And I saw this one post from a woman who is a follower, but she herself is someone who is a researcher and an academic when it comes to minority issues, Asian issues, race and gender issues. And so she posted something that was really interesting the other day. So I wanted to contact her to talk about the topic that she touched on, because it definitely does relate to all of this violence and the assaults, the racism that against Asians that we're seeing. Her name is Dr. Connie Wun. She's the co-founder of AAPI Women Lead, an organization that highlights leadership as well as the issues of violence impacting self-identified Asian and Pacific Islander women and girls across the U.S. But she's an educator, a researcher, a writer, and an organizer when it comes to race and gender biases. So she is joining me now.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So listen, Connie, I wanted to get in touch with you and get you on the show because I read an Instagram post that you had put up just the other day, and it intrigued me because I was in agreement with what you had said. We've been doing shows over several weeks now, all about the growing xenophobia against Asian Americans and Asians around the world because of COVID-19. And, there's so many. We get hundreds of posts and messages sent to us at the May Lee Show as well as NextShark about different incidents. And, it's exhausting. It's because some of it is so violent. But I'm going to read what you wrote so that everybody knows what you wrote. You said, sharing incidents of racial violence is not the same as having an analysis of the violence. We need analysis that take into account the layered history of racial violence plus racial politics in the U.S. It can't just be, here's another picture of an Asian getting beat up. I read that, I'm like, yes, because, after a while, just hearing about assault after assault after assault is horrific, right? It's shocking to us all. It makes us more fearful. It creates more anxiety. It's necessary to know about it, but then not to talk about solutions, I don't think is the best course of action. So I want to know why you said what you did in this Instagram post. What motivated you to say this?
Well, first, I just want to reiterate my gratitude to you and NextShark for covering all of this and being at the forefront of these conversations and helping us to see how widespread the violence has been across the globe. So I wanted to, definitely say thank you for that coverage. And then in terms of my post, so I posted that because I think that we definitely need to remind folks around the history of anti-Asian violence across the United States and across the globe. It's important to do that because we have to historicize this moment and recognize it as a symptom and as a trend around violence against Asians, right? Racialized violence and xenophobic violence. And we also have to understand it as a part of a type of nationalism, right? So I'll say that, I'll address the second part later. Mm-hmm. The first is, in terms of historicizing anti-Asian violence, we have to remember how it is that our diasporas, meaning Asians are a huge diaspora. We come from all over the globe. Right. We're talking about East Asians, Southeast Asians, South Asians, and then, more, and then across everywhere.
Right.
So the point is to remember the history of violence that led us to be everywhere in the world. Meaning, remember the history of colonization. How did Vietnamese war refugees get to the United States? It was a racialized colonial war. You want to think about the Filipinos who are across the globe and in the United States. The history of U.S. colonization was a racialized colonial occupation. You want to think about, Laotians, Cambodians, Hmong are here in the United States in large part because of a racialized colonial war. Meaning there's a history of violence that brought us here. Mm-hmm. Most Americans don't remember this, especially when they look at us and think, oh, they've never been through anything, right? So that's one thing. You have to remember the history of violence that brought the Asians over here to begin with.
Right.
Then you want to remember, moments in history, not just how we got here, but moments in history, such as when coolie labor, Chinese, brought over across the globe to the United States. When they were brought here to replace emancipated enslaved Africans in the United States and in the Caribbean and South America. When coolie Chinese laborers were here, they were seen as dirty, as like viruses, right?
Yep.
People don't remember that history in the 1800s. Then we want to think about, okay, so the United States were like, oh, you know what? These Chinese laborers are kind of taking over labor. So what did they see them as? Like dirty. So then they said, hey, let's do the Chinese Exclusion Act. Mm-hmm. We're going to exclude them after we see them as dirty, right? Then they did it again with the Japanese in terms of, the internment camps, right? So we have histories of anti-Asian violence that one brought us here, and then the way that the United States in particular has responded to us as the dirty ones, they're the criminals, they're the ones that need to be excluded.
Right. So, and I'm glad you mentioned the history because people have to understand that there is a context to everything. And there's a behavior that has been, that historically has been validated over decades of behavior that has been somewhat accepted, right? Even if it's not conscious, it's there underneath, right? And so when things like this, like COVID-19 happen, the knee-jerk reaction is to find someone to blame, right? A scapegoat. So in this case, unfortunately, it became the Chinese virus because Donald Trump kept on saying that. And then of course, the sweeping generality of all Asians being the same. So then my question to you is, then we don't learn from history. History seems to repeat itself, right? Until maybe it blows over. But in this case, I wonder how you are viewing it in terms of the behavior that you're seeing and the amount of violence against Asians. And what is that telling us about where we are today as a nation and as a society?
So I think, Asians have historically been seen as the foreign other. And unfortunately, I think too many Asians have forgotten that or imagined that that was not their situation. Mm-hmm. We've been able to make it, right? One, because I think we have also prescribed to this notion that we are different from other racialized communities, right? But that's only because to the extent that whiteness actually accepts us. So we're always contingent, right? When we fulfill white supremacy's fantasies, then we get accepted. If we're your good doctors, then we're accepted.
Well, it's the whole idea of the model minority, right? That myth of that we are the perfect minority to the point where, wow, you're not really a minority, right? So and Asians have somewhat accepted that because it benefits Asians to be thought of that way. So, I mean, there's a point where it's like, you can't have it both ways, man. I mean, that's how I feel now. It's just like, you can't have it both ways. You can't think you're not a minority because you're being accepted by the mainstream, but then still like embrace your ethnicity and think you can play both sides. I mean, I hate to put it that harshly, but right now, because of what we're going through, I feel like we really have to, be very bold in who we are and what our ethnic background is and what we represent.
We have prescribed to this notion and then benefited from the idea that we could become very close to whiteness. That if we just prescribe to some ideals, that they would save us. And then these ideals are now turning and looking at us like, actually, we're a little bit dirty. Actually, you guys are the reasons that we have this virus. And it's the absolute untruth, but it doesn't matter, right? Because I just watched a video go viral that NextShark posted around this amazing fashion designer who gets taunted, right? And they want to kick her dog. They want to talk about her dog. Yeah. And I remember thinking, this was very convenient. Like, she could be a beautiful designer only to the extent that she didn't contaminate them. So as long as and I have this, I'm hurting because I know that our communities have too long prescribed and benefited from these ideals that white fantasy has had of us.
It seems as if it's very fragile for Asians in terms of the balance of being a minority, right? But then also being accepted as not white. And I don't want to put it that way, but almost as if we are part of the majority and we don't have to worry about, being that minority. It's this like fragility, this fine line. Whereas with, for instance, the African-American community, I think it is much more of a clear delineation. Am I right or wrong about that?
I understand your question and your differentiation. I think the thing is that in a lot of the work that I've been doing around racial and gender violence, a lot of my colleagues and I talk about how anti-Blackness is foundational to this world. So it's not contingent to a historical moment, right? Or it's not contingent upon a virus. It's not contingent upon a war. It's actually the foundation. So that's why it seems, it reads as what you're saying, a little bit more clear. Right? For Asians, and for Asians, that even that term is complicated, right? Because again, there are so many different ethnicities and experiences within that political identity and social identity. For many of us, it's contingent. It's contingent on a war. It was contingent on the Vietnam War. It was contingent upon the Korean War. It was contingent upon, our relationship to China and foreign trade, right? Contingent, so it shifts. That's why it's a little bit more seemingly elusive. But have to remember is that that contingency is very, very rarely up to the other. We don't get to determine when we are going to be the next enemy.
So let's talk about this then. Sorry, did you want to say something else? Yeah.
I did want to say that, I've been on phone calls with a lot of, organizers, a lot of scholars, and a lot of practitioners. And this moment for Asians is really important because it's about how are we going to respond to the social climate, because it's actually another moment by which we are being otherized.
Yep.
Whereas the racial climate has now chosen to highlight us, right? So are we going to continue to prove our worthiness, right? Are we going to continue to prove like, hey, no, we're not the virus? Or are we going to say like, we're about done with you we're about done with you deciding when and where we're the enemy? Mm-hmm. It's our kind of political moment to determine who we're going to be and how we're going to respond to the racial violence. And I don't think it should be stop being violent to me.
Right.
It's more like and it's also, it's also how we're going to confront the racial violence. Right.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Connie, that's exactly what I was going to lead into. So I'm glad you brought it up yourself, because what I wanted to do in this episode was not to continue talking about the violence and the assaults. That's happening. We know that. Day in and day out, we're hearing about this and we're seeing it. We're reading about it. We're angry about it. We're frustrated. We have anxiety about it. But how are we going to take this moment? And I said this last week in my episode, and that's why I was calling out the Asian American community, saying we need to start speaking up more. You need to be more courageous about speaking up about this, and not just saying you're pissed, but thinking about like, okay, how are we going to take this moment? And I actually drew the parallel with Vincent Chin in the 80s. That was a galvanizing moment for the Asian community to come together and to say, enough is enough. You are not going to treat us this way and blame us for something we had nothing to do with. And that really created a movement that was sustained. So now, what are we willing to do? What are we willing to do to make this a sustainable movement to then say, enough? Okay, you cannot treat us this way because we are an important community. We have important voices and we are influential. We have to empower ourselves that way, or else if we don't feel that way and if we don't voice that, why the hell would the rest of the world and this country feel that way about us? Why? They're not going to fight the fight for us. We have to fight the fight, right?
Well, there's a couple of things. I appreciate your framing. One is that we actually, there are multiple steps to it, I think. One is that we have to own our histories, our long legacies of resistance, right?
Yes.
So my family came here. I was born in Oakland. My family came here as Vietnamese war refugees, meaning they survived histories of war.
Right.
And so we have to reclaim that history for ourselves, right? Our families struggled to be here. Right. And here we're talking about the United States in particular, but also this is indigenous people's land. That's not something to be frivolous around, right? Yeah. AAPI Women Lead, our organization has, we have support from indigenous communities because we remember whose land we're on. Mm-hmm. Because as Vietnamese indigenous folks, we were displaced from our land and brought over here. So I bring that up because we have to, one, remember our histories and then remember what it means to be in solidarity with other communities of color.
Yes.
So we didn't fight in Chin on our own, right?
That's right.
Historically, we have historically worked with other communities of color. And when other communities of color call us out, it's a really painful thing when folks are saying, where were you when Black Lives Matter happened, right? Yep. Or where were you? And the question is, where were you?
Right? Exactly. And that is what's happening. I have seen those comments from the African American community during this time, some showing support and grateful for that, but others, maybe rightfully so, saying, hey, how does it feel? And where were you guys when this was happening? And that is a valid point. with communities of color, especially with the Asian community. The Asian community often does ignore other challenges that other communities of color are facing because they think, oh, it's not us. So we're just going to turn a blind eye or not really get involved. Because unfortunately, sometimes that's also the Asian way, right? Traditionally, of just not getting involved. Well, guess what? It's karma coming back. It's, you have to show this kind of solidarity. Like you're saying, during Vincent Chin, communities of color did rally. They did rally together. And that was the beauty of that movement.
We always kind of need each other, right? And so I've been thinking about, the anti-war movements, the anti-Vietnam War movements. It took communities of color who were here in the United States to fight against that end, right? So people have been in international solidarity for a long time. I bring that up because it's not just that we haven't spoken up or been in alliances or in alignment with other communities of color. We haven't checked our own racism, right? Our own colorism within our own communities.
Yep.
So going back, one, it's reclaiming our histories of resistance. Two, it is remembering to be in solidarity with other communities of color. And I also take into account that these history books don't teach other communities of the histories of violence against us.
Yes.
So they don't know. We're newcomers here. To be honest, we may be generations here and decades here, but we're new here. So when I go around and I talk to other communities of color who are not in social justice or who are not in the schools, and I remind them of like the violence we've experienced, people are like, really? That happened to you?
Yep.
We didn't know.
And I think that's why it always gives me some solace and some hope when I do see members of other communities of color coming forward, especially now during what we're going through right now, speaking up and saying this is not right, and really showing their support. And this is what we need to be doing. And again, going back to why we started this conversation, in terms of finding solutions, it does start with that. It does start with connecting with each other and speaking up so that people do become more aware of what's really going on. So then they are therefore more willing to show support and to speak up and to, put out a post or whatever it is, it does make a difference. And that's why I'm trying to call people out saying, listen, you might not think it's a big deal, but for you to put out a little tweet or an Instagram post, showing support or at least calling this out, it does make a difference. It does.
Like more recently, Alicia Garza, who's the founder of Black Lives Matter, issued a tweet that said she had our backs. At our Congresswoman Barbara Lee's office is consistently participating in our work. Tarana Burke, who's the founder of #MeToo, has, she was a part of our conference and said, we're in solidarity with you. Yeah. In fact, she's donated so much to our organization. And I'm just thinking about, we need to highlight the ways that other communities are supporting us. The global letter of racial solidarity that I helped to co-write with a couple of other people.
Right.
It was because I spoke to a Latinx leader, right? A leader in LA. And I said, look, we need your support. And he said, let's launch a campaign. So he's leveraged his relationship. His name is Mike De La Rocha, founder of Evolve Impact, co-founder of Athletes for Impact. He leveraged his relationship with a number of NFL players, with a number of, gymnasts. He leveraged those relationships to help launch a global campaign that is actually launching today in terms of these athletes, right? They have our backs. I've actually received phone calls from a number of other leaders in non-Asian communities of color who are like, what can we do? So it's going to take all of us working together and remembering that history to stop that violence.
Yeah.
It's a yes on talking about how often this is happening. And it's also about having each other's backs. If you see somebody come and is about to try to spit on an Asian person and call it the virus, that's a moment for you to step in.
That's
a
right.
moment for other conversations with others to be like, oh, you potentially have a racist idea. Let me check you on this, right? That has to be, and it can't just be about Asians. It has to be us having these conversations around racism against Black communities, racism against Latinx, racism against, and anti-Indigenous sentiments against people.
Against LGBTQ, against women. I mean, it's all of that. It's all of that. We actually, so many of us have shared experiences. And if we could connect to the fact that there's so much commonality in terms of struggle and challenge, then we actually can have a lot more compassion towards each other instead of thinking, oh, that just happened to those people and it's none of my business. That's BS.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it takes a lot of, it's going to take some humility, right? So it's going to take us to be like, oh man, I think I messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like humility and strength at the same time, where it's like when people say to you, you weren't there for me when, my people were getting beat up, then you get to say, oh man, I wasn't. And but I'm here now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm rethinking, or I now am remembering,
right.
Our relationships to each other.
That's right.
And the world,
I am hoping that the silver lining, and I think there are going to be several silver linings to all of this pandemic. And one of them being that, yes, I think I'm hoping that people will get much more in touch with what's real, what's authentic, and what matters, which is humanity, compassion, love, understanding, and really having that empathy for other people and other experiences, because we're all going through the same thing right now together. But why victimize people even more on top of that for no reason, right? And that's what racism is. It's like, it's just, beating up on people because of the color of their skin, because of their ethnicity, no other reason.
The other thing, May, is like we have to understand that racism is not just like interpersonal, right? You have to think about like a lot of the people who are on the grounds being our essential workers are communities of color. Mm-hmm. You have to think about, like, for instance, my postal worker is a Chinese immigrant person who doesn't have the protections, right? Like, he's still working on the grounds.
Right.
These essential workers, where mostly communities of color don't have support. That's also a type of racial violence.
Yep.
Right? You want to think about the Chinese supermarkets that no one is going to. They're not getting physically attacked, but like the disinvestment from these, small businesses that are ethnically owned. That's a type of racial violence, right? You want to think about Medicare or Medi-Cal, or the fact that many of our communities of color, especially immigrants, don't have access to healthcare. That too is a type of racial violence. Mm-hmm. So it's that person beat that person up. It's about how is it that our communities don't have access to healthcare,
right?
Or how that a lot of our communities are still inside prison right now, being most susceptible to the virus. Or a lot of our folks who are in the informal economy, they are not seen as workers, so they're not going to get that $1,200 stipend. Right. Our nail work, all of them, they're not going to get that stipend. That too is a type of racial violence.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Our health workers on the line, our RNs, our janitors, all of these communities, right? Like, they're suffering. That too is a type of racial violence that we have to kind of like think through.
Well, here's the thing, Connie. I mean, these are all issues that you're bringing up that have existed long before the virus hit. So for people to get worked up about the blatant racism that's going on because of COVID-19, it's totally valid. But we have to remember that there are so many other issues of racism that have been continuing that have been largely ignored. So this, again, could be a wake-up call in terms of, hey, guys, yeah, this is happening. The overt racism is happening because of the virus, but now you got to start looking at all the different ways in which this is happening and what are you going to do about it. Now, in my last episode, I said one way you can make change and incite change is vote, right? Asians have the lowest voter turnout. Well, guess what, guys? If you're not happy about what's going on and how you're being treated and how leadership is failing you, guess what? You got to get out there and freaking vote. Okay? I mean, that's like the easiest thing you could possibly do at this point, to exercise your right to vote for change. But listen, Connie, before I leave you, tell me what you would like people to be doing. I mean, we talked about a couple of things, but what could they be doing right now to make a difference in what's happening?
There are a number of people who have been helping to lead this thing called mutual aid. And I think that racial solidarity is a type of mutual aid. And by mutual aid, it means how do we support one another? And so people have been doing on the grounds things about, identifying how do our elderly need support, how do our disabled folks need support, need to go and deliver groceries, that type of stuff. That's a part of the mutual aid. Creating funds for people, it's a part of mutual aid. So I step back, and in terms of the racial violence, I think that one, we need to make sure that we have these racial solidarity mutual aid projects, I think, which is one, on the grounds, go out. I know we're supposed to be socially distanced. I think we need to be out socially distanced, probably together, have each other's backs. That's one thing in terms of the interpersonal stuff. I think we need to support our most vulnerable folks who are elderly, are ill, are disabled, are incarcerated, are informally, labor folks. We need to have their backs in this moment of vulnerability. And then we need to be in racial solidarity with other communities of color. And then I think other communities of color need to have our backs.
Well, like I said, I'm hoping that the silver lining will be that people understand really what community really means, especially after being in isolation for as long as everybody's going to be. I think there's going to be this craving to have this sense of community again, and what that really means from an authentic, genuine level. So, hey, Connie, it was so great to talk to you. I'm so glad that you were willing to be so honest and open about your thoughts, and also, but putting things into historical context, which I think is very, very important in light of what's going on. But we'll keep in touch. But listen, thank you so much for your information and your time.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone, and stop sending hate mail to everyone. Not okay.
Yeah, no, the hating has got to stop. I hope that's the one thing that comes out of this also, is that we got no time for that. When we're dealing with the same crisis altogether, where does the hate come from? I don't get it. But anyway, all right, Connie, let's keep in touch. Stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that does it for this episode of the May Lee Show. But before I go, I just really want to just remind everyone that we're going through a tough time, all of us. And this virus, it affects every single person on this planet. There's no one that's going untouched by this in some way, either health or economically. Certainly, a lot of us are being hit financially, socially, clearly. Within the Asian community, yeah, we're worried about our safety now. So just remember, though, as I was discussing with our guests, this is testing our humanity. It really is. It's testing our humanity. It's testing our empathy. It's testing our understanding of each other. And if we can rise above this, we are going to be so much better off. We just have to hang in there, but also learn from what we're all going through. And that means trying to educate others, but also educate yourselves. Informing others, but also you should be informed too. It's a process that we have to, embrace all around. So let's try not to be divisive. Let's not try to fuel the hate and the anger I get. Listen, I have my days of being really angry, believe me. But we have to use that anger, if you have it, constructively. That's why I wanted to do the show. I didn't want to just dwell on the negativity and the violence and just talk about the assault one after another after another. I needed to talk about like, how do we get through this? Why does this happen? How do we get through it? Okay? And please speak up. Speak up. I know it can be scary. And if you can't speak up vocally like I do, then do it some other way. Do it by helping others. Do it by volunteering. Do it some way to show that you are more than just a nervous, anxiety-ridden person who just wants to just not do anything, okay? So let's just be in this together. And like I always say at the end of every show, I want to hear from you. Tell me your stories. Tell me your concerns. Ask me questions if you want. I'll answer them. Maybe I'll even do an episode on, where you want to ask me questions, whatever you want, okay? But until then, you guys, stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy, okay? Until next time.